I know I said I was going to step away from the car and take a break because we're going on holiday. It's not actually till tomorrow, so I'm out here after work fixing the car because I couldn't go on holiday knowing it was not right. So I have adjusted one side and that looks much better. It's much more at the right height. I haven't cleaned up the welds or anything yet. I can do that when I get back. But this is the other side, and you can just see how far out I was. This is my 3D printed gauge block, and that's the height I wanted. So that's bang on. If you look here, way off. I still don't know how I did that. It may have been when I did this, I added extra here for some reason. This one's still sitting on a couple of washers, so it's even more off than it should be. But yeah, I still don't know how I did that. But I was able to fix it. You can fix it with one bend and one cut. Basically all I need to do is, because this isn't like that, I can get away with bending this. That brings this down, brings this arm in closer, and you just cut it off here. So I cut it here and I make a cut here at the appropriate place and weld it back on. It's also easier to weld it without the guard in place. Before, I actually had the guard sitting on it when I welded everything up. It's easier to make sure this is perpendicular to the surface of the tyre without the guard in the way. I can see what I'm doing. So what I do is I'll unbolt that, get rid of those washers, find out exactly how much I need to drop it, and then I just simply marked it out on my table. You can see the Sharpie marks, and then I just bent it to suit, basically. Bent it and cut it to suit. So that now looks much better, how it should be, much lower as well. Let the backs come out a bit. There we go. Oh no, I'm starting to question myself again. But tweaks can come later. And I also had to go out and do some last minute shopping, so I popped in and got some vinyl hose. This is the drain hose from the table. I've got my hose going up to the nozzle. I've got a container down here. It's a 30-litre container with pump, and so that's the pickup hose. This is the outlet hose, and I've got, not sure you can see it in there, I've got it draining into a plastic container with some holes around the top. So what I'm hoping is I can leave that sitting up in the coolant, and any little bits of swarf that get washed down should fall into that container and sit at the bottom of that, hopefully, and not fill up this. I'm going to test it without drilling holes in the lid, because if it doesn't work, I can use this container for something else. Somebody did point out in the comments that this stuff is smelly and messy and goes moldy, so we'll see. We'll see how well it works. It might not be worth it, but the cost to set it up is absolutely minimal. So, you know, I haven't spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars. It's probably more like less than $100. The most expensive thing, I think, was the container, and that's multi-use. So if it doesn't work out, that's all good. I'm going to fix that other side now. It's another really hot day, and I may have time to make up the new back brackets. If I can make those and get those welded in place, I'd be pretty happy. So the fixed height is good. That definitely fixed one of the problems, but I'm still struggling to get the guards to fit nicely, and I just don't like this way that I'm doing it. It just doesn't look quite right. So I think I'm going to rethink this and maybe look at the style where the guard stay actually comes in the side of the guard and there's a slot. It was one of the other ways they did it on the originals. So I have been doing some quick experiments with my scrap tube around how you can flatten the ends. This was in the press, and then hitting it with a hammer. Flattening it in the vise actually works pretty well, although you do get these kind of stressed edges which might not be too good for it. And then I basically practice bending it in the vise. That's why I don't want those stress points there, because it would probably crack. But I can definitely bend the tube. That was all done cold as well. I think if you do it with heat, it would work a lot better. But then what I'm thinking is basically welding that straight to a piece of flat bar, not bothering with this whole complicated, where's it gone? It's right in front of me. This whole complicated shape. I don't really need it to wrap around the edges like that. I just need a piece of flat with a very slight curve to match the crown on the top of the guard. So maybe I'd be better to basically make the stays like that, where it kind of welds on and it just pokes through the side of the guard and you've got the bolts. I'm wondering if that's going to be easier to do, which means redoing the stays from scratch, but it's going to give me the clearances and things I need, and I think it'll look a bit more streamlined and just a little bit better. Yeah, I have got my practice guard there, which I might try hacking up just to see what it looks like with that slot cut there, and if that looks sort of neat and clean enough. I think it would, but even then, getting the angles and things right is going to be really hard. So, but yeah, I'm running out of time before we go away, so I think this might be a problem for when I get back, which is going to annoy me when I'm away from home and I can't do anything. But it's worth playing with it now to try and get it right. The other reason I'm thinking the flat is going to work better is because of the rear. I'm going to have the tubes coming out. The rear is going to be even worse because I've got three things I have to line up. The other reason for doing just a simple flat bar is with this, the guard sort of fits around it very tightly, it can't move. If I'm just using a simple sort of flat bar, you could adjust the guards a little bit. There's a little bit of wiggle room on them. So if you need to shift it over 1/4 of an inch to get the center line to line up, you can do that on the guard. Because once you make the stays, it's very difficult. Yeah, very annoying. But at least I know the height it has to be now, and with my little gauge block, it's pretty easy to get that. So I might just go look through my spares and see if I can find those little end pieces. And I should maybe look at machining these as well. But I think for now, I think it's time to stop for the evening. It's very hot. I think my bench has moved as well. That's from bending the tubes and things. And the other thing I might do is get more aluminium tube to practice on, although it doesn't bend as well. Yeah, more thought required. I'm on leave again today. We head up north tomorrow. Luckily I took today off just as a day to get ready to go away, and also because our house sitter will arrive tonight. But I'm having another look at these guard stays, and I've come up with a different way of doing it, which is basically I've remade the brackets and I've extended the ends out, and I'm going to cut a slot in the tube and probably crush it down, but at least weld all the way around it and then grind it all smooth. So that should give me a lot more clearance around the guards. You can see I'm sort of setting this one up here, measuring it so the middle of the stay is in the middle of the guard. There's a little bit of adjustment I need to do here, and then I'll tack it in place before I do the full weld, of course, and check the positioning. I think that's going to look a lot neater, and it'll give me much more clearance around the tyre, especially at the back here. So it won't be quite that long, but that will get me well away from the back of the tyre to allow space for the steering, or the wheel to move when it's steering. And even though it's only been a couple of weeks, I'd forgotten exactly how I made these, so I had to figure all of that out again, which is why I've got all these notes about where to put the bends and things. I did use heat for this tight bend. That seemed to be the best way to do that. But, yeah, I'm going to keep going with this and hopefully get that done today. It's another really hot day. Might need to take a break in a minute. My new top guard stays are working much better. They're just tacked at the moment, but you can see how all that can just be welded and then smoothed off. I've got the car jacked up, so the front axle is sitting on the jack just to get the wheels off the ground, and the guards are awfully close, and I think it's because of the way the front of them is pulling down when I wired them. But you can see there's 1/4 of an inch clearance. That's not enough. Other than that, they're pretty close all the way around, but they'll clear. And those new guard stays at the back, where have they gone? Once I do the same for the back mounts, there'll still be clearance there, which is good. So that'll be fine, but I'm not happy with the front of them, and I think the only actual solution is to make new guards, which I'm not going to do today, but I'll do that when I get back. And I'm going to, instead of being a constant radius, I'm going to flatten them out here, which I think is closer to the originals. It's a bit hard to tell from the pictures, but it's definitely kind of pulled in a bit where I wire the edges, the ends rather. It's a little bit tight at the back as well, not quite so bad, but you can see here it's really pulled in. So I'm going to make new guards, and they'll come out, they'll be a bit more like that, give me more clearance there. I think it'll look better as well. But that stay mounting system is much better, and it was much easier to weld everything as well. I was able to clamp the bracket in place, slide it onto the slot which kind of held it, and then tack it pretty easily and get it centered up. It was much easier to measure everything as well. So new guards, but I'm going to get the rear stays done today. I should be able to reuse these tubes, I think. I can't remember, but that's easy enough. So yeah, that seems to be the way to do it. And some things arrived. First, my new lathe chuck, new 3-jaw 5-inch chuck. The chuck itself seems really nice. I don't know what the run out is on it yet, of course, but it comes with keys and the chuck key and the reversible jaws. It was a bargain. I'm not quite sure why, but I think it was like half price. It might have just been a sale or the end of a run of them or something like that. But the problem is the spindle adapter plate I got off Amazon. That was also pretty reasonable. Doesn't fit. And the problem is I looked up online what the thread was on the spindle nose, and forums, now this is one of the reasons I hate forums, they were talking about it being the same as some other common lathes and it being 1.5" 8 TPI. So that's what I bought. It turns out it isn't. I should have measured it really, but it's kind of close enough that that's what it looks like. It turns out on my lathe it's an M39 4mm pitch, and I've been looking online for a different adapter plate, and so far I haven't found too many. Little Machine Shop do have one, and it's a M39 by 4 6-inch plate that you machine down to fit the chuck, but you do that anyway, so it fits your machine. I think it was about $78 US, but then it's an extra $135 US for postage to New Zealand. So that's getting a bit expensive. I can afford it, and it's not cheap, but you know, it's an investment in the lathe. It'll be good to have a decent chuck. It'll really make a big difference. It just hurts when you have to pay more for the postage than the actual item. So I'm going to keep looking around. I might be able to find it on Amazon. This came off Amazon. Their shipping is usually a bit better, but it turns out it's a bit of a strange size. I think the 5-inch chuck with that on that size thing. Little Machine Shop do sell a 4-inch one, which is more like this, but that's too small. It won't fit the chuck because there isn't enough material there to drill the holes to mount it. So I'll have to get a 6-inch and machine it down and drill the holes. It'll just be a question of where I can get it from that's going to be cheaper. And the other thing that arrived, which is impressive because I'm pretty sure I only ordered it yesterday, was my coolant. And this is the coolant I'm using. This was from Machinery House up in Auckland. I think it was like $30 for the bag, and you mix this with water. It says that it's a rust protector. We will see. Antibacterial, antifungal, easy on hands, low foam. As someone pointed out in the comments, this stuff makes a mess and can end up smelling. So I'm really interested to see what happens. But I've got it all set up. It is running. So this is the maximum flow I get, which is more than enough. And I can cut that back just to a little dribble. But I've basically got it running at the moment to check my drainage is working, and it all seems to be working, but I did have a leak, and the leak was here. It was just this adapter. I think it's still dripping a bit. It's got some sort of little rubber washers around the little fitting, but I don't think they're doing a very good job of sealing. That's why there's a bit of a puddle here. And that seems to be the only place that it's actually leaking from. I might be able to shorten these hoses a bit as well. But it seems to be working. My little plastic tub that I'm using to catch anything that goes down there is too light. It keeps floating, even full of fluid. So I might need to find I'll probably try and find a glass jar, and I'll drill holes in the lid so that that sits upright. The idea being that anything that goes down that hose collects in the bottom of that jar, doesn't go into the coolant. Although it probably doesn't really matter because it'll just float around in the bottom of the tub, and the pump inlet is above the bottom, so any crap should fall to the bottom, I'm guessing. Yeah, I'll have to try actually machining something and see if it just gets flung everywhere. but my little drains seem to be working. Doesn't look like they are, but they are. Yeah, you can see this one is draining. Of course you'll get half the amount because it's sort of splitting a bit. But yeah, I'll have another look at that little fitting on the at the back there, the little drain, and clean it all up, and then I'll leave it running for a bit just to see if there are any more leaks. But I think it's what, 2:30 now. I need to start getting ready to go on our trip. But yeah, I think the solution is going to be new guards. Luckily, I'm pretty sure it's not cold rolled, but that shouldn't matter. Still have that piece of cold steel, and I've got lots of Zintek. Hopefully I've got 1 mil. Yeah, it's 1 mil. Oh, actually I've got a whole other sheet of steel there, so that's good. No shortage of steel. Yeah, I think lifting the nose up a bit is gonna help there. The place looks like a bomb site again. I need to stop and clean up. This I'll have to come back to after my break. Still a little leak there, and it's also leaking, of course, through the bolts that hold the whole thing to the table, so I'll have to seal the underside of those somehow. Probably thread lock on the nuts and a fiber washer or something under the nut that's holding it on. It's going to be interesting to see if this is all rusty when I come back. Lathe, can't do anything. These guard stays. This is definitely the better way to do it, with the tube joining onto the flat bar like that. But even with this, I did a lot of work to get this bend as close to the edge of the guard as possible and get this all out of the way, and it still hits, basically. If we go full right lock, it's just too close. So I'm basically conceding defeat, and because I want to make new guards anyway, I'm just going to make them bigger. There's just not enough clearance with them that close to the wheels. Somebody did ask that in the comments, so whoever that was, yes, you were right to question it. But I thought I could get away with it. It is clearing everywhere, but you're getting down to 1/4 of an inch sort of tolerances, and it's just too close. The other worry is, you know, when you're at full lock, how close it is there. Even if I lift the fronts up a little bit, that's still very close. The reason that's a worry is for low speed manoeuvring. Say you're in a car park and you're turning and you go over a judder bar, the wheel's going to deflect, hit the guards. High speed isn't a worry because, of course, you don't typically have very high steering angles at higher speed. So I'm going to stop now. We're going on holiday tomorrow. I think basically start from scratch. Make new guards. I'm going to make the radius bigger. I might be able to reuse my side pieces I already cut. That'll probably work for the back, but the front won't, because I do definitely want to pull this up, flatten this out a bit. I think that'll look a lot better. But yeah, I think I've learned the better way to do it. I can reuse these brackets. These are all just tack welded in place, so I just need to cut the tacks. So at least all these bits of bracket I've been making can be reused. This is the other front one. The guards will still be the same width. That's the correct sort of width. So You can't make the guards wide enough to cover the wheels at all wheel extremes. They'd end up being sort of this wide, so this is all right. Yeah, I think that's where I'm going to leave it. Time to start cleaning up, I would say. I don't want to leave a mess and then go away for a week. I've had my tidy up and I'm looking at my gauge I used to draw out the sides, and I've realised another mistake I made way back at the beginning. I figured out the radius I needed for the guards and then added on the 3 inches. So this cuts out the side profile. I forgot to add on the extra ½ inch that you get. So the side profile from the middle, from there to there is 15 inches, which is can't really do this with one hand, but that's what I've got on my gauge there for the rear. You can see the front is at 14, but that's to allow for the rolled edge. So there's about ½ inch. So even then I'm sort of missing a bit. But the side profile comes up and then curves in, and the top comes across and curves down. So the outside of the guard is actually ½ inch higher than the bigger radius at the side, if that makes sense. And I think I've forgotten to take that into account, because if I hold one of the guards 2½ inches above the wheel, it looks right. So when I redo these, I'm going to have to think very carefully about exactly what my measurements are. And I think I'll make a new template thing. I'm still going to flare out the front top bits of the guards. I think that will look better, and it'll help with that little curve on the end. But yeah, definitely start again. It's going to be the best way to proceed, I think. They'll be the same width, so like I say, I can reuse the brackets, which is good. But I've made so many of those now, I can make those pretty quickly.